Good evening. My name is Ricky Levine. I'm the director of the Holland Museum. It's great to have all of you join us tonight. I use the pronouns she, her. Tonight's program is part of Holland Museum's Cultural Lens series. The series is sponsored by Spectrum Health Zealand Hospital and Warner Norcross and Judd. We're also grateful to have the continued support from Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This program is being recorded, and if you want to go back to it or refer somebody else to see it, you can go to the Holland Museum YouTube channel tomorrow. And then in the next couple of days, it will also be on our website under our Cultural Lens series. I'm going to ask that you all stay on mute because that will be less distracting for everybody else. I also encourage you to select speaker mode on your Zoom screen, and that way you are just looking at the person who's speaking as opposed to the distractions of having a lot of faces and a lot of boxes. If you think of a question during the course of the program, feel free to put it in the chat box, and the panel will be sure to see those questions at the end when they do their Q&A. After these programs, we do send out surveys, and we really encourage you and request that you fill them out. They're really brief, but they give us a lot of information to help us get better at doing these programs. So please take a few minutes when you do get that link. So right now at the museum, we have a temporary exhibit called Election Reflection Memorabilia from Holland, Michigan. And in the lobby exhibit, we have one on voter suppression, which is a service learning project by Upward Bound students at Holland High School. So we do hope that you come to the museum soon to explore these exhibits as well as our permanent galleries. Upcoming programs, which are part of this series, the Cultural Lens series, continue in January with our third annual celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Plans right now are for both virtual and in-person museum events for families of all ages. And on February 4th, the sister program to tonight's program with a panel of individuals identified as this panel's allies are going to be in a program called Allyship, sharing stories on being an effective ally. So in other words, the panelists tonight have selected people in their lives that are strong allies for them, and those people are going to be sharing their stories. So it's a nice second phase to this program. We're also adding additional programs in the first quarter and are finalizing some of the details. Information can be found on our website when they are finalized, but feel free to follow us on social media or sign up for our e-newsletter, and we will be sure to get that information out to you quickly. The museum's current hours are Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays. We're open from 10 to 5 p.m. And in addition to the exhibits, we also have a wonderful gift shop. So if you're looking for something unique for the holidays, please consider checking that out. As well as memberships. Memberships make great stocking stuffers, and you can purchase a membership either in the museum, online, or on the phone. So think about that as a gift. We are always open the second Monday of the month in the evening from 4 to 7 p.m. for free, and we've been doing that now for a couple of years as well. Next second Monday is December 14th, which is next Monday. And we continue to offer these programs at no cost. We continue to open the museum that evening at no cost because we really want to be as accessible as possible to everyone in the community. So if you're enjoying the programs that we put on and you see the value in what we're doing and want to support us and have the capacity to do so, please consider a gift, particularly now. Things are really tough for nonprofits of all kinds. Excuse me. So on for tonight, this panel conversation, Doing the Work, Authentic Allyship, is offered in partnership with Grounded in Equity, LLC, and its founder, Christine Mwangi. Christine has utilized her entrepreneurial background to develop a curriculum that has helped educate hundreds of marginalized women on critical women's health matters. She is the founder and president of Be a Rose, Inc., a nonprofit that combats period poverty and develops community partnerships through which marginalized and underserved people in Grand Rapids gain access to much needed feminine hygiene products not covered by Medicaid nor food stamps, so they're free of charge. As a global citizen who has lived, worked, and been educated in 3 continents, Africa, North America, and Europe, Christine possesses a global lens that she skillfully uses to facilitate courageous conversations about race, privilege, and culture. She lends her expertise and thought-provoking leadership to nonprofits, educational institutions, foundations, and public sector organizations. She's also the founder and CEO of Grounded in Equity, a consulting agency committed to partnering with organizations prepared to design and execute critical people management practices or possess of corporate cultural shifts and sustainable systems of change that yield greater social belonging, organizational performance, and possibility. Most recently, Christine launched Pulsing Black, a podcast aimed to provide a platform for storytelling of stories from people holding different Black identities to highlight their diverse experiences in the United States and beyond. Full disclosure, Christine is a mentor in my own diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, and she's become a good friend in the process. And please allow me to welcome Christine.
Thank you, Ricky. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this space. Welcome to this program. I am so delighted to be here this evening to moderate this panel on a topic that I think is critically important. I think at many of our life journeys, we will always find ourselves in positions where we can align ourselves or center ourselves as allies for others, regardless of our background and identities. So this is a session that can be utilized for you, that you can share with friends. I'm so glad it will also be extended to you as a recording so that you can share widely with others in your network, in your places of work, perhaps places of worship, or just your community at large. So thank you very much to the Holland Museum for having me. And I hope you all have a great time this evening and that you learn a lot. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists this evening, starting with Dr. Isai Umene, whose pronouns are he, him. Dr. Umene is a lead in advanced technology development at GHSP with over 13 years of experience in electromagnetic modeling and advanced technology development. He has expertise in innovation, development, and strategy with a specialty in power devices. He has worked on several products from concept to realization across industries, from consumer products to automotive. Dr. Umene has a passion for Afro-enfranchisement and franchisement in the areas of business and community development. He is a Pan-Africanist who sees value in improving the lives of minorities and diverse communities by tapping into what their cultures and experiences have to offer. He is engaged in multiple efforts within this realm as a member of the African Collaborative Network based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and founder of business consulting and investment fund, Berivan Consulting. He is an opinion writer and owner of the blog Musings of an Afro SOP, and an active speaker and participant in various forums about the Afro-diasporan experience and what they have to bring to both where they call home and the home that they come from. Second on the panel is Jazz McKinney. Jazz, whose pronouns are they, them, is a Black, Indigenous, Ojibwe, and Cherokee two-spirit individual that, although born and raised in Detroit, has made West Michigan their home. Jazz has been involved in the mental health field for over 7 years and with racial justice work as well as advocacy, activism in the 2S LGBTQ+ community for over 15 years. They have committed themselves to highlighting the importance of education, awareness, and involvement to create change. They are the current interim executive director of the Grand Rapids Pride Center, and they are passionate about working to decolonize gender roles and identities, as well as discussing the impact that harmful gender binaries can cause within our communities. Third on the panel is Reyna Masko, pronouns she, her, who has worked for Ottawa County Friend of the Court for over 20 years. In 2013, Reyna was appointed by the Ottawa County Administrator as chair of the county's Cultural Intelligence Committee, CIC. In 2015, the CIC launched an annual diversity forum to highlight the issues that underrepresented, ethnically diverse, and LGBTQ communities face, and strategies that businesses and government agencies are executing to create a more inclusive and equitable county. Through her work with the CIC, Reyna has become an advocate within the Latino community. She has served on board of directors for the Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, LIDA, is a steering committee member of the Lakeshore Latinas and a member of the Latina Network of West Michigan. She is the co-chair of the City of Grand Haven Human Relations Commission and works as the Children and Youth Coordinator at St. John's Episcopal Church in Grand Haven, where she is also a member of the Latino ministry El Corazon. She is the co-chair of the Tri-Cities Puentes Initiative, a nonprofit organization whose mission is building bridges and cultural understanding through the celebration of Hispanic and Latinx community. She is the co-chair of the Grand Haven Hispanic Heritage Fiesta, and in 2017 was the Athena Award nominee finalist named Top 50 Latinas in Michigan in 2018. 2019 Alas Latinas Award recipient and the first person to receive the Ottawa County's Excellence in Equity Award in 2019. Okay, you can all go home now because after that one, I think we're done here. Reyna, you are amazing. Lastly, we have Zahabia Usmani. Zahabia Ahmed Usmani, pronouns she, her, was born in Karachi, Pakistan, but has lived primarily in the US, Florida, Texas, and California for most of her life. She considers Southern California her home, even though she has now lived in Michigan for a longer amount of time. Zahabia is a wife, a sister, daughter, and mom of 3 kids ages 17, 15, and 10. She has worked in market research and for nonprofits, currently working for the Kaufman Interfaith Institute at Grand Valley State University. As program coordinator at Kaufman, Zahabia works on leading the Kaufman Youth Interfaith Scholars Summer Service Day Camps and assists on all the other flagship programs for the organization. Her passion is the intersection of social justice and interfaith, which is also a main theme for the scholars this year. Active participation in our community drives her to participate on boards of directors such as the LIDA Board, Fair Housing Center of West Michigan, Model Communities Initiative, Diversity Rocks the Books, Women of Color Give, and many other social justice initiatives in her community. She has also just started her master's in public administration at GVSU. Thank you very much to the members of this panel for being here this evening, and I will start our program immediately. So being an ally is an antidote to isolation, not just for those who are targeted by oppression, but also those in the targeting role. It empowers everybody involved, and we are all here this evening because our community needs the voices, opinions, and help of people from many different groups in ally roles. Being an ally effectively is not only about listening and learning, it requires taking courageous, bold action. Oftentimes, allies are privy to conversations, information, and spaces that marginalized group members are not, and therefore they have the power to advocate for more inclusive practices. To start our program this evening, I will ask the first question to each panelist in the order in which I named them. So being an ally is not an identity you wear. It is not a noun, but rather it is a verb. It is a lifelong process of building relationships on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals or communities. We'll start with Zahabia. Please share a successful example of allyship that you have been on the receiving end of. Tell us why that example was successful.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you this evening. I am actually going to share my brother's story because it's the best story that I have in my life to give you as an example. So when my brother Azam was in medical school in Chicago at a very hierarchical medical school program, medical school students were never really invited into the operating room to observe a procedure, but somehow my brother got this opportunity. He got all prepped and ready for this experience and walked into the room full of medical professionals, excited, nervous, and eager. As soon as he walked in, the main surgeon, the one whose operating room this was, says, "Doesn't Azam look like that effing towelhead Osama bin Laden?" Completely blindsided, angry, and ashamed, my brother walked out of the room. He called me shaking and crying immediately after this happened, asking for advice. He told me the story, and when I asked him what the reaction was of the others in the room, he said, no one flinched. We later found out that this doctor was so sexist, misogynistic, racist, etc., that anyone and everyone who worked with him just tolerated this behavior because that was what they had to do. I suggested my brother call his mentor and a father figure in his life named Dr. Shea. Being a white man of privilege, Dr. Shea didn't know what to say to my brother. All he said was, "I'm really sorry that happened," and that, my brother Azam had the right to feel upset, and hung up the phone. The next morning, when Dr. Shea told his wife what had happened, she actually confronted him saying, "What are you going to do about this, John?" That's when Dr. Shea realized that he could be more than a compassionate ear, and it was his duty to be an ally or an accomplice in the situation. He asked my brother if it was okay if he talked to the hospital administration about what had happened, which my brother reluctantly agreed to. And the Islamophobic surgeon who was close to retiring that said this comment to my brother ended up being asked to leave early without much of what he was going to get in his retirement package. My brother felt bad about that, saying that he put a lot of years in and shouldn't have lost what he had earned. But I reminded him no one flinched. So at what cost did he earn what was coming to him? This example was successful because, one, a powerful woman who understood the hospital culture and loved my brother asked, "What are you going to do about this?" And also because a powerful white person stood up against injustice, which was also a risky move for him to take as well. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you, Zahabia. Zoom call 101. Dr. Umenei, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I just heard that story and I totally cannot top it, but I think there are certain elements there that would resonate across the board. So my example of an ally is someone who went out of their way to be able to not only employ, but bring me into this country as a professional specialist. Background, I am from Cameroon, West Africa. I was trained in both West Africa and in Europe. And I got up to the top of my field. I got my graduate's degree. Now, long story short, an email shows up in my inbox in the UK that some person in the UK has sent my CV somewhere and wants to interview me for a job that I barely knew existed. So I get on, I honestly thought it was a joke, but I got on the phone and I talked with an HR lady And then she told me, yeah, we will fly you to the US next week. And then I came over from the UK for my interview. And then I met with this team of people running a small company. And it didn't take me long to be able to find out that most of the people they had never seen, heard, or knew about me, that the first time they heard about me was when their boss, whom I didn't get to see, put my CV in front of them and asked them that they should prepare for an interview with me. Now, I say all this just to be able to preface the fact that I did get the job, came in, got to learn about the people, but then I got to learn about the boss. The boss who I employed a West African guy whom you've never seen, heard of, and brought him over here into a team made of predominantly white people. Let me not say predominantly, completely white people. At the time, it didn't faze me as much, but in learning about him, I quickly understood that he went on a limb to do something that was not typical. That's the first thing. The second thing was, once he got to meet me and got the team to know me, there was never a push or propagation towards conformity to what the team normally did. And so his allyship was not only going out on a limb out of his typical networks, out of his typical country, to employ a guy whose name I am pretty sure did not sound like a Johnson or anything, but decided to go out on a limb to be able to figure out and give a chance. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, even after coming into that space, being able to understand that the reason that they employed me was not for conformity or integration, was for me to be able to do a job. So for me, that is one of the views of allyship, where there was going out of your normal network, going out of your typical to do something that is completely out of the typical, out of your comfort zone, really. And then the second thing is understanding or having enough cultural competency to know that because you're an ally doesn't mean that whoever you're an ally to has to conform to the environment in which you're bringing them.
Thank you so much. Jazz?
Thank you. I think for me, it was kind of hard for me to actually pare down which one I wanted to talk about, which I guess is a good thing for my ally. But the one that kind of sticks out in my head is I was in a meeting that my ally was attending as well. And the meeting had got pretty heated over some, social justice issue. I don't even remember the exact issue we were talking about now, but and my ally had voiced their opinion, and they were upset and, kind of loud and boisterous, I guess. They were crying, that sort of thing. And, everybody was like very attentive to that and, like, oh my gosh, how can we make this better? And then I spoke up and said something, and I, according to them, started to yell and, kind of that angry Black person stereotype. And they were like, you can't say that to me. You can't talk to me like that. I'm super triggered now because I have mental health issues. And just kind of blew me off, basically told me to shut up. And so it didn't happen necessarily right in that moment, because after they told me to shut up, I think I did get quiet, because that wasn't me being loud, and I was about to actually get loud, and I was like, nope, let me pause, let me take a deep breath. And then I just decided I didn't want to deal with it, so I just decided to leave. Well, my ally walks me out and was crying because she said, I can't believe that just happened to you, and I don't honestly feel okay with me just leaving it alone. However, I want to get your permission to handle the situation because I just want to know where you're at. Like, do you want me to handle the situation? Do you want me to step back? Do you want me to step up? Like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, honestly, I don't think I can handle the situation tonight because the way I feel, I'm about to fulfill that stereotype of being an angry Black person. And so I don't want to handle it tonight. And so she was like, do you mind if I take it? And I was like, absolutely, have at it. And so we went back in the building and she confronted these two white men, because of course it was two white men, and basically told them off and was like, this is not cool. What you did was extremely racist. I'm not standing for that. Like, you treated me with kindness when I was upset and I was a lot louder, and just basically told them off and told them what they did wrong, and then didn't leave until they offered me an apology, a sincere apology, not just like I'm confronted apology. And didn't leave until they offered a sincere apology and a way that they were going to try to do better next time.
Wow. Thank you, Jazz. Finally, Reyna.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My ally, actually, I would consider, was born the day that this happened to me. And it happened to me at church. And I was looking through everyone that's here today, and someone that was actually at that church and was an ally that day is actually here today as well, which is Nancy Collins. But a little bit of backstory so that you can understand exactly what happened. On a Saturday, the Latino ministry at St. John's, where I currently work as a children's and youth coordinator, we had a fundraiser. And the next day, it was Sunday, we had church. And so we had food left over, and we were also going to have a meeting on immigration at the church. So, we planned that after the service, we were going to go and heat up food and then be able to, eat that while we were having our immigration meeting. So after the service, myself and about 6 of our church members walked into the kitchen, and we actually serve meals to whoever needs a meal on Sundays. And so we were kind of stunned because the kitchen had people in it, and so we didn't mean to like bust in, but we were going to go heat up food. And while we all came through, the lady who was the main person cooking that day yelled at us, and she really just yelled, and she said to get out, that we couldn't be there. And so I kind of didn't understand why. I had just started working in the church. I hadn't been there long enough to understand what was going on. And so I was in shock, that someone would just yell to get out. And so we walked out, but I returned. I led everyone to the place that we were meeting, and I returned and talked to her and really confronted her about why she had been so rude, that all we were trying to do was, heat up the food and take it to our meeting. And so she actually apologized. She said it was too many people in the kitchen. And so I asked if one person could come in and heat up the food. And that way all of us wouldn't be there. And she agreed. So I went back, asked one of the ladies if she would please come back and heat up the food. And make a long story short, 10 minutes later, she returned to get the food, and the lady had turned off the stove to make sure that the food didn't get heated. And so she went back and she said she wasn't going to allow the food to get heated. she had purposely turned off the stove for her. And so I had to go back. And I went and talked to her, and I asked her why. Why would she do that? You know, what was the purpose of that? And so once again, I told her how rude that was not needed. And she apologized. She said she had had a bad day. And I thought we had a good conversation. You know, I didn't yell at her. She didn't yell at me. I thought that was the end of it. And I went back to the meeting where Nancy Collins was a part of. And so while we were almost starting the meeting, next thing you know, someone was coming down the hallway yelling. And I didn't know what was going on. So I went out to look to see who was yelling in the hallway. And this white gentleman was actually looking for me, yelling at me. And one of the things he said is like, why did you make my friend upset? You need to go back to where you came from. And I was like, what? And then he started walking away into the kitchen. And I just started walking behind him because I was just like we are here to church, you know, like, and I don't even know this person. And as I'm walking behind him, Nancy's behind him and everybody else is behind me. And we go into the kitchen. And I remember Nancy standing next to me. And I asked the gentleman, what did you say to me? And he said again, you need to go back to where you came from. And I said, well, where exactly would you like me to go back to? And he said, whatever city you came from. And I said, I actually live here in Grand Haven, but that's not what you meant. And so Nancy at that point actually stepped in and she started talking to him. And she says, do you realize what you said? Do you realize how racist that is? And do you really realize the impact that you have on telling someone to go back to where they came from? And so I remember that very vividly. I don't really remember everything else because at that point I was just really upset. And we left. And I actually came home, right? I think for me, he didn't just tell me go back to where I came from. He told everyone that looked like me, that was right behind me, go back to where they came from. So it was even more impactful for me that they had also witnessed that. And so I came home, and by the time I got home, Nancy had called Father Jarrett. And Father Jarrett called me and he apologized to me. And he said, I want you to know that I called that man and I told him he is no longer welcome at our church. He doesn't even go to our church. He was just volunteering in serving food that day. So he wasn't even a member of our church. And he said, I told him he is never allowed to come back to church unless he apologizes to you. And so I didn't expect that really to happen. I expected what normally happens is for someone to tell you, I'm sorry that happened to you, you know, that was not okay, and have that be the end of it. But for him to go to the extent of telling that person that they're no longer welcome at the church, unless they apologize to me, really, really meant the world to me, because I knew that I was working at a place where I was going to be protected from what happened, and that he was really going to stand by what he says the church is about, right? Like where everyone's welcome. The church is really big on social justice. And to me, that day he proved to me what the church really stands for. The reason why this was successful was two things. One, because there were people there that were willing to speak up in that moment. So I'm always thankful for Nancy for doing that. And then for her to also call the person in charge, and for that person in charge to really, do something about it and say that that was not acceptable. And the third reason why that was really impactful was because my children, when I came home, they found out what had happened. And so that it became emotional for them as well, because they've known I have dealt with things like that, but I have never like came home right after that. And for them to have seen the impact that that had had on me, because I was emotional about it. And the most important one is that that gentleman came back to the church a couple of months later and asked to speak to me. And I have to tell you that his apology was what I felt was one of the most heartfelt apologies I have ever received in my life. And so to me, that just made the whole experience like very successful.
Thank you so much, Reyna. And I think the theme that really has been highlighted with these stories today, and as you listen to the rest of this program, is that there is a cost to allyship. There's a cost when you assume the role of an ally, and there's a cost if you don't. And so you have to be prepared that in some spaces that you occupy, in some roles that you hold, the moment you feel you need to step up to be an ally to somebody, there will be a cost. And if you don't, there will be another type of cost. And so it is a journey that requires courage and bravery, but it is a journey that, the rewards are vast. Like Reyna mentioned, by somebody stepping up to her, stepping up for her, it affected even those that were there who looked like her. When she went home, and that story extended to her household, when Zahabia's brother told her what happened to him, etc. So sometimes your allyship, you may not see the fruits of your labor immediately, but it could be what is necessary to make a shift even in the culture of that space, so that people in the future can have a different experience. So in all of this, we're seeing that trust is needed, and trust is something that is earned through concerted action and is essentially the foundation of effective relationships between allies and the people that they are standing up for. So the next question is for Dr. Umenei and Reyna, in that order. What action or behaviors did you find that your ally demonstrated that were crucial in building trust? And, thereafter giving you the confidence to share your truth and your personal narratives. What did your ally do to demonstrate trust?
I think because I'm discussing my allyship in the context of a professional relationship, some of the things that I think are essential might be pretty much construed as normal, but for somebody benefiting from allyship, those can be really important. Now, in terms of, I did allude to the fact before that once I was employed and brought into this predominantly male-dominated company space, there was a tacit acceptance of who I was without any pressure to be part of the group. I know American corporate culture always talks about, do get one for the team, etc. But I think my ally recognized the fact that I was coming from a completely different reality. And so to get the best out of me in that situation, he literally used to, on purpose, give me a certain amount of leeway, really, rope to draw, because he knew I was coming new into American corporate culture. And sometimes that can be misconstrued as more favoritism to the ally who is doing that. But I think as an ally, you have to be prepared to take some of those hits to be able to reap the most benefits out of this person with who you're typically introducing into a space that they are not originally there. So I think given that customized approach to somebody that you're allying to is I think it's a very important part of making me become even better, or making me get accepted, or at least feel accepted into the professional space. I think the second thing that stands out to me in terms of what was able to make me be what I was in that space or for that company was there were never limited expectations. I explain this way. Call it affirmative action, call it, there's a very thin line between trying to be an ally and having a God complex sometimes. And so that is a space that people that you try to mentor or ally yourself to can easily seed through if you are not, as an ally, be very careful and honest. That is not to say that allies and ally relationships don't come with intrinsic mistakes and hurts. It just means that because of who they see you are, those who are receiving allyship understand what are genuine mistakes in the process of knowing each other or of benefiting from each other versus condescension. And so I think one of the things that makes that space is the ally being able, at least the ally in my case, being honest in making mistakes while interfacing with me. And I always said there is almost no progress without the uncomfortable. Our uncomfortability was, first of all, built off a certain base trust that, hey, I went out on a limb, I brought you here, so that established a certain level of trust. And so the ability to want to make mistakes and learn from an ally can be really powerful. Sometimes a more powerful message to the person that you're allying to than the ability to keep it a more very clean, professional, and sometimes, and most times you miss those intersections that can actually improve your ally relationship. So the ability to be honest in mistakes, knowing that the space that you are creating is bigger than the discomfort that the imminent discomfort that you are experiencing relative to a long-term relationship, and that's okay. And also the ability to customize a relationship with that ally relative to the fact that more often than not, you're giving them or bringing them into a completely new space than they're used to.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Reyna?
I think the actions of that day for me were the trust that was built that day, and the trust where somebody was willing to stand next to me and ask questions, right? And it wasn't just speaking out for me, but being intentional in asking questions of this person that put him in a position to have to answer, really think about what he had said and answer to not just me, but everyone that was in that room, like why he said what he said and what that meant. And I think that sometimes when we find ourselves in those moments, we're things can get heated up and we're just, saying things. But for me, Nancy was so intentional in saying, do you realize what you just said? Please explain what you said, and really making that person realize the intensity of his words. So that for me right there, having someone do that on the spot, really helped me, really helped that person earn my trust. And then that not being enough for her, but contacting the person who is in charge, right? And asking them to do something. And then that person immediately, not waiting for the next day, not waiting for, hours to go by, but to immediately make sure that he was speaking to that person and letting him know that whatever he had said was not tolerated at our space, at our church. I can't tell you how much that meant to me. And I am at St. John's today still because of that. Because if that had not happened, I would have left. I wouldn't have felt comfortable going to work in a space where no one was going to, speak out against that. So it wasn't for me just building trust, but that loyalty that I feel towards both of those people and to the church itself.
Thank you, Reyna. I really appreciate you all discussing that allyship can sometimes look like the savior complex. I think that's what Dr. Umene was alluding to, but also that there's a high risk of performative allyship if trust is not the foundation of your relationship with the person for whom you want to stand up for. And the risk of that is that when you start to see the side effects or the symptoms of your allyship. I'm sorry, I was a pharmacist in my other life, so symptoms and side effects. But there will be a ripple effect of you being an ally in that space. And if you were in a performative stance, it can be very painful and detrimental for both you and your the person that you're allying for, because it will get to a point where the trust they thought they had in you can no longer help move the situation further towards change, because now you've checked out and realized this is too much of a cost for me. I'm not gonna move forward in this direction. And it can almost feel like abandonment for the person that you were, helping, because now they're like, wait, I thought I could count on Reyna, but I don't know now, right? And so on the other hand, being an effective ally does not mean you have to be expected to know everything. There is no ally kit. I wish there was, because I would be selling it to you at the end of this event. There is no kit to say you are now fully qualified and certified to be an ally, go on your way, and you will never make mistakes. You will never hurt anybody. That is not the case. We are human. And I tell people all the time, in your journey, what is a journey towards more inclusive cultures in any space you occupy, give yourself some grace. Be prepared to be self-aware and inclusive, but more importantly, to take action. So for Zahabia and Jazz, in that order, name 2 other qualities that your ally exhibited that provided you with emotional, mental, or any other form of support to enhance your already trusting relationship.
Okay. I'm going to talk about 3 characteristics. So some of the most important characteristics, I believe, of a great ally are, of course, an openness to learn, the idea of decentering yourself, and bravery, which are characteristics we've heard in everyone's stories so far today. But acknowledging, based on the stories that we've heard today, that being an ally or accomplice is not easy, right? Being an ally or accomplice requires that you not sail under the radar, that it sometimes requires that you stand up against your family, colleagues, peers, sometimes even your supervisors, the institutions that you work for, and basically any of those places that you can actually feel really comfortable can become really uncomfortable places. So taking the step of listening with an open mind to what your friend or this person that you're being an ally to is saying is hard to do, because it most likely will not fit with the way you have walked through life. And that's hard. Comprehending and knowing that injustice exists all the time for some people and maybe not for you in that way is hard. So when your reaction is to want to ignore the burdens of the world, taking the step of decentering yourself so that you can better understand someone's experience with an open mind is crucial. Then being brave enough to confront the people or maybe even the systems that perpetuate harm is what is required. This bravery is heroic. I think like what Reyna is talking about with Nancy Collins, who I'm also proud to know, is heroic, right? Or like what Dr. Shea did is heroic, or in Jazz's story, or in the doctor's story. Those are all heroes, right? So it's heroic, this work of justice, and it has to happen in tandem. So thank you all for being here to take this first step, and just know that that's the way we're going to break down some of the inequality in our community.
Thank you, Zahabia. Jazz?
Can I say ditto? Because that was great. But for me, I will add to that and say consistency is important. And I don't know another word right. I would guess I would also just say empowering. Like, you know, my ally is very consistent. Like that's what helps to form that relationship and help continue to provide me with any sort of support that I may or may not need. You know, even if it's just other situations, right? Like even if she's not involved personally, I know I can still call her and say, hey, I had this situation, you know, and even while she's on the phone, she's like, who do I know? You know, who can I call? And I'm like, calm down, I'm just venting, like, you know, but I think that consistency is really what helps to build that on top of, you know, the bravery and those things. And then, you know, again, I would agree with the decentering because my ally is very conscious about always asking for my experience. So even if it's a situation, even if it's something they're involved in, they're always making sure they're like, you know, but what did you experience? Because here's what I experienced, you know, almost kind of like for me, you know, like the situation that I mentioned, like, you know, she's like, I was upset for you, but what are you experiencing? You know, before she just went on her, you know, ally tirade, I call it, you know, she wanted to make sure that I actually was upset first or that I, you know, so I think decentering is perfect for that. But as far as empowering goes, I think it's really important for allies to understand that for a lot of, you know, people who maybe don't have as much voice or marginalized populations, whatever you want to call us, disenfranchised, anything like that, my ally is really good at passing the mic. You know, like she doesn't always have to speak for me because she knows I'm really well at speaking for myself, but she makes sure that she grabs the mic so then she can just pass it to me. Because yes, there are times that like my voice is overshadowed based on the situation. And so I think she does that really well. Like, you know, I call her sometimes because there are times that I need her to what I call use her white voice. Like there's been times we've been in a meeting where I have said something and it just went completely over the people's head. And then like she, you know, raised her hand and she said basically the same exact thing I said. And they were all like, oh yeah, that's great, you know? And then she'll stop and say, yeah, but that's what Jazz just said. So why didn't you listen to Jazz? Jazz has been saying this, right? So like, again, she'll speak up, but then she'll pass the mic. And I think that's really important as well as knowing when to pass the mic because it's not that I don't have a voice, it's just that people don't allow me to use it.
Wow, thank you. That is so, so powerful. And I think what came to mind as you were both speaking of those experiences is that allyship can be lonely. So if you are embarking on a journey to figure out where you can be an ally, make a plan of who can support you as you are an ally. It can get lonely and it can get heavy. How do you process the things that you are now committing to be in close proximity of that you otherwise are not? How are you going to cope with the realities of the person you're allying as you learn about their narrative and their truth? And it be so vastly different from the world you know to be the one you both exist in, and that to not be your reality. Who will be your support so you don't have ally fatigue, so you don't have ally burnout, because it's real. If you are in predominant spaces where allyship is not a thing, and now all of a sudden you're the first or the only to demonstrate effective allyship, who is supporting you through that? Who are you talking to about that? So that doesn't manifest in ways that hurts your relationship with the person that you are standing up for, or in abandonment altogether. So it's quite apparent that for our panelists, that your allies were not performative allies who were forging superficial relationship with you, but rather they were true allies who committed to an active and intentional journey of being open-minded, learning new things, unlearning some things, because I always tell people, you can't learn if your basket is full of things you need to unlearn. Sometimes you got to take some stuff out that is no longer serving you, serving those around you, in order to learn those that are more effective, and being comfortable with discomfort when it comes to speaking up about injustice. So for Reyna and Jazz, in that order, what advice do you have for people who may be listening and thinking, I don't want to offend anybody by offering to be an ally. I don't want to even assume that they're helpless either. How do I start my journey as an ally without causing them harm? How do I even know when somebody needs an ally? Reyna?
I mean, I think everything starts with relationships, right? And everything starts at some point. So being intentional, I always like to use that word, because I think that when you're dealing with this work, everything has to be intentional. So the first thing you have to also do is get used to being uncomfortable in asking questions, and it's okay if you don't know. That's the first thing. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable, and you have to be able to share when you don't know. And that's the only way to build the trust and build relationship, and really be able to be honest with the other person, right? You're going to get to know that person, and then you're going to get to know when they need you, and when they need you, then when you need to step in and also help. And I will tell you, I was sharing something with someone a little bit ago, that for me, Nancy being an ally and her speaking when she did allow me the time to calm down, because she saved me from being looked at as that angry brown girl, right? So although Nancy and I only knew each other, in that moment, there's so many different things that played into that built my relationship. And so I feel like at any point you can really call on your ally and build a stronger bond. I don't know. To me, relationships are crucial to having an honest conversation with your ally. There's so many different allies that have come into my life, and they play different roles for me. One of the allies that I had shared with you all was, my cousin Amy Masko. She's my husband's cousin. She's a white woman, but I can't tell you how knowledgeable she is about race and education, and she teaches this at Grand Valley. So I have so much trust in her knowledge, and she has a lot of trust in me being able to be honest with her in every way possible. I mean, like, we are really truthful and no judgment. So I think that's another quality that you have to be able to have with your ally, is being willing to just be honest and truthful and not judge each other, because we all make mistakes. We all have, really, really bad days. But being able to call your ally and talking to them about what you're feeling and having them help you unpack your feelings and listening, and then for them to be able to provide some kind of guidance sometimes is just so needed.
Thank you so much, Reyna. Jazz?
Sorry, I double clicked myself. I would definitely agree, you know, with what Reyna said. She definitely took one of the things right out my mouth, and that I think that's educating yourself about, I mean, not everything, but everything, you know, like we, you know, as BIPOC people or people of color, there's so much history to unpack that even for my allies, I don't have time to unpack it all, right? Like that just puts more burden on me to have to be like, well, here's why I don't like the angry Black woman thing, or here's why I don't like the, you know, the immigration issue, or like, you know, like it's so much stuff that people can experience. And then I think particularly for me, you know, because I am somebody who checks a lot of marginalized boxes, you know, I think that's, my ally does really well at understanding the mounting oppressions or the mounting stressors that I experience. And so, you know, my ally being also part of the LGBTQ community. So, you know, she stands up for me with that community, right? Like she also stands up for me, you know, when it comes to race issues and, you know, so it's like just trying to be knowledgeable about what's happening or what the people experience. And I think that also comes from consistency as well. And, you know, just building that relationship, you know, like they said, because there's a lot of things that my ally knows about me just because we're friends and we've talked. And, you know, like, it's not every day that we're having a how can I be an ally conversation. It's just real life conversation. And then she remembers it, right? I don't have to bring it up again. She's like, oh, wow, yeah, that probably affected you because of this thing you experienced. And then I would just also say, I think I understand the concern, of course, about like not wanting to do more harm and, you know, when do I be an ally? Being an ally, like we mentioned earlier, it's a verb, it's an action word. It is something you have to do all the time. So you may not be able to be an ally for me specifically, maybe in that moment, but there's almost always somebody who needs an ally, you know? And so just, and just going back to the word decentering, right? Like if you don't have such a unilateral focus that everything in the world revolves around you, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but in a way that understanding like, hey, I experienced this thing, realistically, people could experience that differently. What does that look like? Is there something I need to pay attention to here? You know, so it's not always you know, I'm not always going to be like, hey, I need an ally here. You know, like most of the time, I don't ask for an ally to show up. They just do, right? Because somebody said, huh, that situation is weird. Or maybe they just saw my face, right? Because I have this thing that I'm particularly not upset about, but other people sometimes get upset about the fact that I show my emotions on my face. And so I think my ally, and particularly the one I was talking about, is really good at reading my emotions, particularly if we're in the same room or, you know, that sort of thing. She's really good at reading my emotions. And like, there are times she may just like touch my leg or something, like, nope, don't do it. Like, calm down. Like, you know, like, but again, that comes from time and building that relationship. And, you know, but again, just reading the room and understanding that people experience things in different ways.
And Christine, if I may say something, one of the questions was like, how do I know when someone needs an ally? And to me is the moment that you're in a room and something racist, homophobic, whatever is said, and no one says anything. That's when you're an ally. That's when you're needed. that's when you need to speak up. And even if no person of color is in the room, a person of color doesn't have to be in the room for you to become an ally. You can become an ally within your own, environment without anyone else being there. But that moment, you can't let that moment pass by. You can't let it be okay.
I think that's the best time to be an ally. Like, that's how I know my ally is a true ally, is not when I'm just watching. Like, I know that my ally is having these conversations when I'm not. In fact, most of her conversations happen when I'm not around.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. I think I am taking notes myself. I heard that you don't have to ally up for every area of that person's life. Like you don't have to feel that because you're their ally at work, you got to be their ally in their neighborhood association, you got to be their ally at their child's PTA conference, you have to be an ally at the doctor's office, you have to be an ally at their place of worship. You can also just pick a space where your relationship is grounded with that person, continue to build, as Jazz said, so that that relationship can deepen, and you can find more organic ways to transition your allyship to other areas if appropriate. Because I think what could happen is, you get on this journey, you feel so good that you stood up for somebody, and now you want to stand up in everything in their business, and they're like, wait a minute, I did not invite you to this side of my life. Like, what are you doing? We are coworkers, or we are church friends, and now you're in my business about my child's care or whatever that is, and you're like, I just want to help in more areas of your life, and now you have to set boundaries. So the other thing I heard was intersectionality, and that is common, right? So you can find somebody who holds multiple identities and feel like you need to champion the good of all their identities. That can be exhausting. It can also be triggering in situations or situations and experiences that person has been through that you're not even privy of because your relationship is not mature enough with them. So just be mindful. If somebody holds a lot of marginalized identities, that you let your relationship grow and organically introduce you to opportunities to be an ally. And again, they don't have to be there for you to continue being an ally. They don't have to be the only person who you center all your allyship energy on. There's plenty opportunities, and we all need allies. Decentering, right? When that word was said, I thought of an experience I had when I first moved to West Michigan. I think within the span of 1 month, I had been asked, do you have a church family, more times than I had been asked that question in my entire life. I remember my parents asking me, how's it going? How's your resettling there? And I told my dad, if one more person asks me if I've found a church, I will find a church, West Michigan people, like, it's okay. But then I thought to myself, what if I wasn't a Christian? What if every time that question was asked, the response was not, I will find one or I have one? What happens to people who don't hold that faith identity when that is such a centered topic in this region? That was one of the first very polarizing experiences I had, although I was a Christian, although in fact, I moved to Grand Rapids on I think it was a Tuesday. I Googled a few churches, I read reviews, and I was in church that Sunday. Like, I'm serious about my Jesus, right? But I thought to myself, what would my experience as a new Grand Rapidian been if every time I am asked that question? I mean, I got asked that question at work, at the doctor's office, everywhere. And I was like, what is these people's obsession with church? But I found that could be a really toxic thing if I wasn't answering that question in the right way, because I realized there was only one answer. What if I said I was Muslim? What if I said I was Hindu? What if I was Sikh? What if I was atheist or agnostic? What then would have been the next building block of my relationship with that person, right? And realizing that in all that questioning about whether I had a church, it was well intended. Nobody was asking me at church so somebody can harm me, hurt me, say something disparaging. But I realized if that was not a way I identified, that question could have been very harmful. So that was also another experience of how intention and impact can be different. And acknowledging that if you do unintentionally hurt somebody, that your response is not to be so self-governed and defensive about your intention, but to acknowledge impact, right? You know, and I know your intention was not to hurt me, but I am hurt. Let's acknowledge the impact that your action or words have had on me and move forward appropriately, right? And so many allies indeed do face barriers to allyship that they may not even be aware of. We may not even know what we don't know, whether it's through the language that we are using, whether it's by staying quiet around certain family members or friends when things that are not okay are said around us, or countless other harmless decisions or seemingly harmless decisions that we might find difficult to see what our actions can do and target the very communities we hope to be allies for. So for Isai and Zahabia, was there ever an interaction with your ally that you found particularly difficult? What was that interaction like and how did you move past it? Dr. Umenei? You're muted.
Sorry, I was already going on my diatribe and then I discovered I wasn't on. But yeah, I was just saying that for me, the probably the most uncomfortable occasion that I found myself in, or a situation that I found myself with my ally, actually turned out to be one of the things we've talked about, the idea of being uncomfortable in a situation. My ally invited me to his home on one of his, he typically brings a couple of friends together, and that was the first time that I discovered that my ally and I came from completely different political inclinations, because I found myself in a space with people who maybe did not recognize, I doubt that, or acknowledge, I doubt that, or were just completely tone deaf to my presence, were very comfortable expressing political positions that were appalling to me, because some of them directly affected people of my minority or and stuff like that, and it was normal to them. But hugely startling, not even uncomfortable to me. It was more startling than uncomfortable, because I was just like, okay, these are the kinds of people my ally associates with. So more than my ally directly getting me uncomfortable, but the environment from whence he came and the people that he interacted with, or with friends, were at odds with a lot of what I stood for or I was. So I typically am not a quiet person. So if I see or hear something, I say something. So, but in that case, I did not necessarily go at this because I didn't know them. We're not in conversation. They were just talking around me and saying all kinds of things. But I was able to fairly talk with my ally, and it was very good to know his positions on things. We do not agree politically, but that uncomfortable situation kind of made me understand him more, but I think also made me, in a weird sense, respect him even more, because I knew what his influences were, but the fact that he had decided to venture out of what was normal to him. And because I could see him through that lens, I could understand some of the other difficult or uncomfortable moments that we were going through. because now I knew a little bit more of him. So I think one of those uncomfortable positions are utterly necessary, but I also think they are very informative or to the person being allied, or I don't know whether it's an ally and an ally, I don't know what the word is, but for you who's being allied, those uncomfortable positions are also places for us to learn. Because in as much as this is not a one-sided relationship and cannot be if it's going to be sustainable. If you're going to have an ally who is bringing you into this space, is standing up for you, then if there's anything called a relationship, then there should be something that you are looking for to do, or something for that ally too. That's how relationship is sustained one way or the other. It cannot be a one-way street.
Thank you so much. Zahabia?
Yeah, I would like to build on the topic of intersectionality a little bit. And so I'd like to talk about when BIPOC folks hold positions of power, like maybe serving on a board. They bring many identities with them. So as a board member of a justice organization, I brought my understanding of interfaith and my experience as a religious minority in this community to a discussion regarding the practice of conflating the term Christianity to equal faith in our community, which Christine, you touched on a bit. So now when I brought this up, even in a space in which I quote unquote held power, I was really scared and nervous, right? I'm challenging something that is so core to a lot of people in this community. And just, I felt like I was in dangerous territory. Then one of the responses I received from a board member was, maybe it's just my Christian privilege, but I don't see it that way. FYI to anybody listening, if you start any sentence with maybe it's just my X, Y, or Z privilege, don't do it. Like, just stop right there. That's not a way to be an ally.
Yeah.
So please know that this is why allies are necessary, because in that moment, I needed the other maybe Christian voices to speak up and maybe say, I can see where Zahabia is coming from. Yet on the other hand, the response of the staff exemplified decentering themselves and taking on the learning journey. They went above and beyond, holding a panel guided and moderated by the Kaufman Interfaith Institute to learn more about the interfaith perspective from people of a variety of religious, spiritual, and secular backgrounds. I was super proud to be a board member in that moment. That to me was allyship. So yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you so much, Zahabia. And, you know, allyship can be difficult for the person being an ally or the person that the allyship is directed towards. And sometimes you can find yourself in a flip-flopped situation where the person who was receiving the allyship now becomes the ally. And so that also is an interesting dynamic that can happen. And I'll give a candid story, and the person in the story is actually here. Tamala, I know you're here because you support everything in my life. So Tamala is one of my really good friends, and she is a white woman, and she is what I would call my nonprofit fairy godmother, because when I moved to West Michigan and I was finding my way in the nonprofit sector, I took one of her trainings and we became friends after that, and she kind of guided me. And at that time, I didn't even know what an ally was. I just knew that this woman is leveraging her identity and her position in certain places in this community to help me learn the ropes and give me the resources to be successful. And because I didn't start my social justice journey until later, where some of these terms you're hearing today were defined to me as a Black immigrant, right? And so it wasn't until we went back home to my native country of Kenya with Tamala, then I realized, oh my God, I need to be Tamala's ally. Like, she's going to be the minority in Kenya. I need to prepare her of what she will experience because of her identity in my country, and prepare her even on our culture. And I remember telling her, there are things you will see me doing that I don't do in America that may seem very foreign to you, but, and sometimes they might even seem oppressive to you, but they are things of my culture that I have actually missed. One of the things I told her was, when we go home and we go visiting to somebody's house and it's time to eat, we've blessed the food, the women serve the men first, then we serve the children and eat last. It's almost like an honor code for us. And I couldn't wait to go home and serve my dad, because I hadn't done that in a few years, not being home. And I miss just like serving my dad as a token of honor and respect and gratitude almost. And so Tamala was like, but I told her, I said, because you're a guest, you'll get to eat at the first round with the men. She was like, well, why? I said, because you're a guest, and be comfortable with that. It'll be really weird. I can't eat until after you, but you have to do it, right? So it was just interesting to see our relationship flip. But because we had a foundation, we trusted each other, we could travel across many oceans together, and we had each other's back, right? I remember when we went to our first resort, because mostly we stayed with family, and I remember we were in the lobby and Tamala saw other white people, and she was like, oh, white people. I said, oh, you notice those white people? That's how I feel every day in America when I see a Black person. I'm like, oh my God, my people, even if we're not related. I'm like, oh, Black person. For no other reason than the isolation I otherwise feel in all the predominantly white spaces I occupy. And it just goes to show how well gelled we are as friends. I remember even another example. Sorry, Tamala, I'm putting all our business in the street, but it's good material. When Tamala would constantly invite me to her church, and I didn't know how to tell her, like, I don't want to come to your church, Tamala. And it's for no other reason than the fact that Sunday is a day that I get to be in a predominantly Black space by choice. Like, I can't afford to be in another predominantly white space on another day that I don't have to, because I need that spiritual rest. And we're Christians, we're both Christians. I'm sure the service in her church is great, but for me, it was more than that. And I finally mustered up the courage to tell her, I love you, but I can't come to your church. I reserve Sundays as a day of spiritual rest, that I want to be in my predominantly Black church. And for no other reason than to just not feel like an eye is on me, or, you know, what are people thinking? What are people saying, when I'm supposed to be getting spiritually fed? And so it goes to show you that allyship can be a gift, and it can gift both people at different times of their relationship together. It can allow for that, their experiences to broaden, even in times when the person who is being allied has to be the ally. And so in closing, oh, we are almost out of time. We didn't answer any of our questions, but I promise we'll answer them offline and give them to you by email. In 1 or 2 words to each of the panelists, what is the biggest gift that allyship, effective allyship, has given you in your life? Zahabia, Reyna, Dr. Umenei, and Jazz.
You know, for me, you know, it's all the things we've talked about today. I had a longer answer to this, but just to condense it down in the interest of time, the day-to-day, the feeling of safety and security after the elections, I will say, my family was scared. And knowing that people reached out to me via text, via not the recent elections, but the previous elections, our family was scared. And people reached out, and my neighbors reassured me that they were looking out for us. Wonderful pastors I do interfaith work with said, you hold congregational prayers at your house. That may not be safe for your family. Please use our church. Those pieces, I cannot tell you what they mean to people who are, you know, might be scared. And just know that sometimes it's not just a matter of like needing someone to speak up because of, you know, because of it's the right thing to do. Sometimes there's real fear. Sometimes there's real danger, that you experience or you feel like could happen. So that is the gift that allyship has given me.
I think for me has been vulnerability, the ability to just, be emotional if I have to, and that person being okay with it, and empathy. Those have been the gifts for me, knowing that I can call this person and just be me in all my flaws and emotions and whatever I have, without judgment. That has been the biggest gift for me.
Sorry, you're muted.
Yes, I discovered. I would say opportunity, because allyship almost always comes with people who have who reside in a certain privilege, and so opportunity with those who are not in that is a definite show of allyship. But I also think honesty is another thing that allyship has helped me get. Not only honesty with myself and honesty with them, but also honesty within the space that they create to be who I am. And so that encompasses for me what allyship has given.
I will say, peace and comfort, peace of mind, peace of heart, just peace and comfort to be able to continue to do the work that I know I'm supposed to do, but that I have, strong supporters, on the side of me, walking alongside of me.
Thank you so much. For me, if I had to mention something, for me, it's like protection to function in my purpose. I often think of it as like a car without a windshield, and my ally is my windshield. So all the elements that could otherwise harm me, hurt me, disrupt my process in what I am commissioned to do, they stand in that gap. And I feel like I can fly because I know that they're there, they're supporting me. And even if hard times come, I know they're still there. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I know you had amazing questions. They will not go unanswered. We will answer them offline and ensure that the museum gets a hold of them so that everybody who will be watching this and signed up for this will receive the answers to those questions. We thank you and honor you all, especially our panelists and all of you for being here. And Ricky, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you so much for the panel. This was just a really, really exceptional evening. I personally learned so much, and I suspect by the comments that we're seeing that a lot of people did. And I think it was a great opportunity. Yes, we will answer your questions. You'll also have an opportunity if you have additional questions after the program, if you want to send them to us when you get your survey and fill in your survey, please. We'll make sure that the questions go to Christine and she will disseminate them to the panel and we'll get them back to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you again for this informative evening where you shared so much of yourselves. Can't wait to meet your allies and we will see you soon. Happy holidays, everyone. Stay safe.
Actually, Ricky, it was asked whether you shared, I know you did, but if you could share again the information about the next panel, the second panel to this.
Yes, that's on February 7th. Registration is not yet open for that. It will be probably in the beginning of the year, but it's February 7th, same time, 7 o'clock, in the same process. Just register and join us at that event, and that will also be recorded. Okay, everyone. Good night. Thank you again.